But Kelsey was gracious enough to say that the prosecutors themselves during that September 14th meeting didn't really apply any pressure. She asked, "You knew we wanted to talk." "Yes." "You said you felt pressure from us." "Yes, I felt pressure prior to coming. But then Kelsey said, I didn't feel pressures per se from you guys specifically that day. I felt pressured of coming. I felt pressure when people coming to my door, people threatening, telling me I'm going to go to jail if I don't come."
Hey guys, it's your girl, Crystal Nicole. So yesterday was Tory Lanez hearing for a new trial, and as I'm sure you've all heard by now, it was just a total disappointment. It seems like the judge may have been a little on the biased side with the way he was acting like the prosecution more than the judge, arguing their case for them and all, but I digress. The biggest thing that I took from this is that the judge felt like they never objected to anything and they should have added ineffective counsel, which I believe they did in their supplement. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Now, obviously, we are going to start with the claim that they never objected to Kelsey's interview being played, which obviously they did, by letting him know that this was being entered in late and they had no transcripts to reference to say why this shouldn't be played in full, outside of the mere fact that she had repeatedly just stated on the stand that a lot of what she had just said in that interview was a lie. So why bother? So the defense is claiming that it was not even them who opened the door to the whole pressure topic with Kelsey. It was actually the prosecutors who had opened that door and then closed that door when they themselves questioned Kelsey about them pressuring her to do this interview that day, and she said no. They did nothing that day to make her feel pressured. So the excuse that they needed to play this interview to prove that they had not pressured Kelsey was in fact a false reason, as she had just said it on the stand when they asked her outright. Why would they need to hear it again by playing the full interview? They opened the door for her to be questioned in that way, because when they questioned Kelsey, they tried to accuse the defense of basically pressuring her to come forward and change her story through bribes, etc. Let's replay that.
"Have you ever met me before?" "No." Now, if you remember yesterday, there were a whole bunch of questions that the prosecutor asked Kelsey about defense attorneys bribing you, Tory Lanez bribing you. Did anyone from the defense contact you? So now the defense attorney for Tory Lanez is saying, "Have we ever met before?" "No." "Have you met anyone in my defense team?" "No." "Any phone calls from us, defense team, to you?" "No." "Have you spoke to Tory Lanez?" "No." "You did meet Tory Lanez after the shooting?" "Yes, to get my suitcase and belongings." And then he asked,
So see, the prosecutors opened this door for Kelsey to be questioned in this way about them because they tried to question Kelsey about whether the defense had done anything to her to cause her to come forward and change her story. So therefore, if you're going to accuse us of something, we have every right to question her about whether or not y'all pressured her to come speak to y'all to begin with. And we're going to hear the reason why they were asking her how she felt pressured to come in right now.
From July of 2020, when this incident happened, July 12th, to September of 22, that's when Kelsey made the first statement. So from July of 2020 to September of 22, did you ever make any statements to the police or prosecutors? She said no. And that's actually true. She completely did not cooperate with the investigation. And every time that they tried to reach out to Kelsey in 2020, 2021, and 2022, she either hung up the phone, said she didn't want to talk. So Then the defense attorney asked, it wasn't until you became aware of the gunshot residue and that the defense theory in this case that you decided to come forward. You learned that the defense was going to say you were the shooter, and then you decided to meet with prosecutors. Then she didn't really have an answer. And then the defense attorney said, did you ever actually receive any money from Tory? No. And then she actually said, I want to make this very clear. I have never received any money from Tory Lanez.
So see, they were asking her, has she felt pressured to come in and speak to the DA because she found out that she had tested positive for gunshot residue. And she had also found out that they were getting ready to accuse her of being the shooter. And Kelsey does not want to answer this question about whether or not she came forward because she found this information out. Now, there is some truth to these claims because in the interview with prosecutors, without even being asked, Kelsey just starts going into this story about gunshot residue and not remembering them ever testing her, being swabbed, how all that works, etc. She outright just tried to make it seem like they were lying about her testing positive because she couldn't even remember them testing her when she was being questioned at the precinct.
Put me in a room. They came in. Took pictures, if I'm not mistaken. I honestly don't recall them swabbing my hand for any residue or anything. And
you don't recall it happening, but it could have happened. You just don't remember.
No, I really don't, like, unless, because I don't know how that works. What the swab part is. I don't even remember them disclosing that they were about to swab me, and I know that I would remember that unless, again, I had very high adrenaline. Maybe that part. I don't believe they swabbed me. Just, that's my knowledge. I know they came in and took pictures.
Did the prosecutors pressure you to meet with them? And she said yes. Did they want to clear up if you were the shooter? I don't remember. But then you agreed to meet with them so that no one would accuse you of being the shooter. I don't know. Well, you did not agree to meet with the police or the prosecutors in 2020 and 2021, not until you learned about the defense theory in this case. Did the prosecution pressure you to meet? Yes. So the only thing that changed between not meeting with the prosecutors and meeting with them was learning about the defense theory in this case, the GSR and the defense theory saying that she's the shooter. And then she said yes. When you met with the prosecutors and to today, did anyone contact you? Defense attorney, Tory Lanez, defense team, any people from this camp contact you? No. She said no. Did the defense pressure you? No. Did the prosecution pressure you? And she said yes. So this is not really going well for the prosecution.
So as you heard from the beginning of this video, the prosecution had a chance to cross-examine Kelsey again after the defense asked her all of this. And they too asked her, had they pressured her? And she was like, no, I didn't mean like you pressured me that day to like do this interview. I was saying like I felt pressured to like come in to speak just because of, you know, people coming to my door at other times, you guys threatening me with jail if I didn't come forward and speak. So yeah, I mean, it was prior things, but not that day, not for this interview. So she had already answered this question. So there was absolutely zero reason for them to have to play the full interview just because she had been questioned about being pressured. Both of you questioned her about being pressured, and she gave an answer. So how did we get to her having her full interview played just because of this? Moving on to the next issue. We're going to keep this one short and simple. I don't understand what the judge is talking about they didn't object to this. They didn't have to object to this because they argued this. They argued this in their opening statements. They even questioned the detective about it when he was on the stand, I believe. So this was argued. I don't understand why they needed to personally object. Were they supposed to object during Megan's victim statement or something? Because they definitely put this in their opening statement, so it kind of was put out there that there was no truth to that. So even if she said it, it was a lie. The same thing that they're saying right now. Y'all knew this was a lie. It should have never been brought up again because y'all found out a year before that there was no truth to these claims, because that same detective on the stand was the one who investigated it and found no truth to it. So why was this even mentioned? That was their whole point. And there's too many instances here where y'all keep saying, oh, well, this wasn't really entered in for the truth of the matter. He still could have said it even if they never found anything about it. That's hearsay. You can't just assert that, well, it had to be some truth to it because, Megan said it. Moving on. So there were two issues raised about this TMZ post. Now, of course, it was the Instagram comment that was allowed to be entered in by the judge through the testimony of the detective, claiming that he had investigated it and found out it came from Tory Lanez's account, although he admitted that he didn't find out if he had actually written it. There was also the issue of Little Jew Made the Beat claiming that they had matched the bullets from his gun to the one in Megan's feet, which obviously was not true because they never discovered who this weapon belonged to, and the fragments had gone missing for that to have any truth to it. Therefore, both of these things should have never been allowed to be entered in as evidence. But the judge claims that, well, this was not objected to. So once again, judge, like we see from Megan Cunham's article, she said that prosecutors were likely to bring up the fact that George did argue about the authorship of this post during his cross of the detective, and that it was George's most effective trial examination. I guess the judge must not have been paying that much attention during trial or even this hearing, but I digress. Anyway, we also have a big issue with this Instagram comment anyway, because this post was made in September 2020 after Megan had accused Tory of being the shooter. So when Spliff K here left this comment saying people being the key word there, people are saying Kelsey shot her, and he said that's not true, because who was saying that Kelsey shot her when Megan had literally just come out and said that Tory was the one who shot her, and Tory had been the one who had been arrested that night for a gun. So it was not true that people were saying Kelsey was the shooter. I mean, it was true well before August, before Megan even named who the shooter was. Yes, they were going back and forth between it was Tory and Kelsey, but after Megan came out and explicitly said that it was Tory, I don't recall too many people running around saying, people are saying Kelsey shot her. If so, somebody please drop me a receipt. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. So the argument for the DNA and the new trial motion was that they did acknowledge that their expert had also testified to the inconclusive findings, just like the prosecutor's expert had testified to. But they said that their expert had also made it clear that it would have been standard to have a DNA sample from everyone at the scene, and that if Tory had shot this weapon 5 times, his DNA should have been found on it, and it wasn't. They also argued that the testing had not complied with industry standards, basically talking about when they stopped it before its completion. And then they had raised the question about the quality of Sean Hawley's pre-trial work for Lanez, stating that The defense's expert failed to ever memorialize any of these findings in any report or documentary form. That the expert was never asked to produce a report on the issue of DNA in advance of the trial. So they had nothing to present to the jury to clarify the true weight of the DNA evidence. So basically what they're saying is that whoever the expert was who did the DNA testing before the trial, he did not give no type of worksheet, no write-up, no nothing regarding his findings. And those findings are the same things that they're arguing right now. So they had this information technically before trial, meaning Sean Hawley technically had this information before trial, but for some reason this information was not given to the two new attorneys who was arguing for Lanez at his current trial while she wasn't there to be able to argue this. So because they did not have this worksheet, they didn't have anything to be able to say, oh, well, we actually have this that says it was 100% excluded. So what are y'all talking about? They didn't have this. They're saying that they didn't get this information until after trial was over. So therefore, they could not make this argument during trial. And it's a little unfair for the judge to try to claim that, well, you didn't make this argument during trial. It's like, look, we argued the DNA heavily during trial, but the prosecution constantly wanted to keep coming back to, well, we can't really say it wasn't there just because it was inconclusive, but you know, so he technically could have still touched this weapon. Like, let's not go there. They really pressed on this really hard during the trial. So again, if the defense did not have the information available to them for them to be actually able to combat this, and it wasn't their fault, it was Sean Hawley's fault. That's why they said they brought her up in this as basically calling her out as ineffective counsel as well. So they're also adding that along with the ineffective counsel. Like, you know, because his counsel has only had 2 weeks to prepare for this, they didn't have all of, you know, the inside information and all of this that Sean Hawley had built up over these past couple years. Like, they had 2 weeks versus her like 2 years to get ready for this trial. So I don't really know what to say anymore about this one. I feel like they made their case on this, and it's just the judge just being really difficult as we're seeing going along through this. So anyway, on to the next thing. So last but not least, we're going to go over the whole chilling Tory's right to testify thing. So they had argued that the prosecution tried to use music videos, rap lyrics, and other things to try and make Tory look like a violent criminal if he chose to testify. And the judge had said that he would consider these things on a case-by-case basis, meaning, okay, I'm not saying you can't bring any of these things up, but I may or may not allow you to proceed with the questioning depending on what it is. So test your luck. Anything definitely related to the case, however, was going to be allowed. So this is why they chose to say no, because the judge never denied the prosecutors the right to use these things if he testified. He left it up in the air. So if Tory took the stand and started testifying, and they in turn proceeded to ask him things irrelevant to the case to make him look bad, the judge could just let them proceed, claiming he thought it was relevant, and that would have been that. So they said, don't do it for rightful reasons. That's why the judge is saying, well, I never said I would let them. I just said I consider it. You know, he still could have taken a stand. The judge is not as slick as he thinks he is. Like, come on, boo-boo. Now, as far as tattoos and stuff goes, it is what it is on that one. They deceitfully used that picture to claim that it was just for identity purposes, which they can do. But then they turned around and used it to make it seem like he had a thing for guns because there was one tattooed on his chest. That is just art, and it was unrelated to this case, like they argued, and they really shouldn't have done that. It seems as if Tory's team did add ineffective counsel to their supplemental motion, which the judge originally tried to act like they never said anything about until they pointed to the page, and then it turned into, well, you didn't argue that in your original motion. Like, who cares? They're still arguing it. Like, whew. Are you sure you even bothered to read their motions, or did you just skim through it? Because this is the most insane thing I have ever seen, heard, witnessed, whatever. And he really needs to be taken off this case like they claim they plan to do. Because all he did was repeat the prosecution's arguments that the defense never objected to things that they in fact objected to and argued about during the trial. They didn't just let any of these things slide. That's why Tory's team was hesitant to say that they were ineffective, because they did do their job and they did the best they could given the time they had to prepare, but they were still unprepared for a lot that they were just randomly hit with, especially with that Kelsey interview. They really should have called her back to the stand, but by the time that it was played, she had been dismissed. Still not a good excuse, hence the ineffective counsel add-on. Now, I am just tired. I have been up all night going over all of this all over again, and I really have nothing more to say. The judge just has to go. The defense did their best to argue against him, and it was really just all in vain. So let's hope that he is removed, and if not, that the sentencing will be light so that Tory can continue to fight against this very wrongful conviction. So with that being said, excuse me, it is still free Tory over here. And thanks for watching. I'll see you all later. Goodbye.